Hello and welcome to LandTalk, the program that tells the stories of people on the land. My name is Matt Sykes. Today we've come to the small West Gippsland township of Bullen. Located on Old Sale Road, the town sits on the original track which connected Melbourne to eastern Victoria. The settlers here knew this area as big timber country, but we've come today to meet Dean Kriesl, a beekeeper. Dean, thanks for having us.
No worries, Matt. Anytime.
So Dean, how did you actually start as a beekeeper?
I was always interested in it as a kid, and we sort of dabbled in it because there was a chap that had bees on our property. But then it probably kicked off to the degree it is now when a swarm turned up at my house I was living in and sat on the front fence. And I thought, oh, here's an opportunity. So I frantically ran around and tried to organise a box to put them in, and I couldn't find anyone that was a beekeeper. And I thought, well, that's a bit strange, there should be heaps of them around. And I managed to actually catch the swarm and put it into a box, and then I came across an ad in the paper and bought a heap of stuff, and it started from there.
Well, that's how it began.
One swarm turned up in the front yard.
Humans love bees because they produce honey.
Yep.
How is honey actually made?
Honey's made from nectar, which is a sugar syrup mixture that's made by plants. The bees seek that as a food source, and in the process they also collect pollen as protein. Now the nectar that they get, which is the sugar syrup source, goes into their intestinal tract, and through a digestive system it changes some of the sugar content in it, and then they regurgitate it back into the cells, which you can see in these here. They fill that up and then it actually dries. If you have a look at some of these are actually empty, and you can see that they may have a little bit of liquid in the bottoms of them. They haven't been capped. Once it actually reaches a certain moisture content, they then cap it with what you can see here, which is this capping wax, and that seals it. It's a bit like a preserved jam.
And in front of us we've got a great selection of honey.
Yep.
And there seem to be different types and different stages. How does honey actually change throughout the seasons and depending on the location and the plants?
Depending on the type of plant that it's actually originated from, there's certain flavonoids that are mixed in with it. Now they're only in very small percentages, but those percentages are a bit like hormones. A very small amount can have a massive outcome on the taste or the colour of it. This one here, typically, that's a type of clover pasture honey, and it candies really quick. So the ratios of the sugars that are in that are different to this one here, which is probably more from local eucalypts. Okay. And the ratios of the sugars in that are different to this, which is why that one, even though that's older, that's actually got honeycomb in it. Right. Even though it's older, it's still liquid. Okay. And that's the same stuff without the honeycomb in it.
Bees are also vital for plants because of their role in pollination.
Oh, absolutely, yep.
But how does that actually impact us?
Production-wise, it's stated that about 1 in 3 of the bits of fruit that you eat, and 1 in 3 sort of any plant that you're eating as a vegetable, like a pumpkin or something, is pollinated by bees. That's how important it is. If they failed to exist, humanity would probably fall off the face of the planet within at least a year or two. It'd be quite cataclysmic. Yeah.
Right. People in urban areas are now kind of taking up the challenge and getting involved with urban beekeeping initiatives. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
From my experiences, I've got bees in rural areas and in urban environments. The ones that are actually in urban environments do better because of the broad variety of plants that are in bloom pretty much all the way through the year. Generally in rural environments you tend to find that there's a type of monoculture where it's either pasture or it's forestry or corn crops or canola crops and things like that. So it's on full throttle and then it's off for certain parts of the year. So the bees can actually make a living out of it, but as far as consistent getting rid of all the ups and downs in it, urban bees actually do a lot better, especially in a small scale, and they're very easy to set up in backyards.
Yeah, right. What are some of the business opportunities for beekeepers?
It's still quite labour intensive. Generally, as a value-added organic product, it's at the high end of the market. Things like, well, take these for instance, which are wooden sections. One of those probably holds, I don't know, probably about 200 grams of honey. The returns on doing labour intensive stuff like that for its presentation and its wholesome nature is a lot greater than just mass producing honey. So small scale beekeepers can actually make quite a impressive little slush fund out of it every year.
And do they actually work with farmers growing fruit or commercial agriculture?
Yeah, in Australia there is a degree of commercial agriculture that depends on almonds, for example. Massive almond groves that need bees to pollinate them. Without the bees, they wouldn't get a crop.
What kind of environmental impact are you looking to have with your bees?
If you look at what one individual can do, it's probably not a lot when it comes to planting trees. It's very labour intensive. By farming bees, you effectively got a little army. The little army goes out and they pollinate, they make seeds, and then through natural selection, those seeds then hit the ground, and the strong ones will take off and the weak ones will wither and die. So as a reforestation method, if you wanted to plant 1 million trees, get a couple of thousand bees. And that's what'll happen.
Dean, is there any difference between the productivity of European bees versus native bees?
Yep. Native bees are stingless and they generally only make probably about 1.5 kilograms of honey a year. A productive European bee, like an Italian variety of European bees, can do a minimum of about 15 kilograms, so about 10 times in a year. If they're placed in places where they have a lot of flowers, it's called a nectar flow, they can pretty much make a 15 kilo box, one of the boxes on top of it, in a fortnight.
Right.
Fill it in a fortnight.
Okay. How do we look after our bees?
The environment that they're in, they're under pressure from all areas. Their habitat gets reduced through monoculture. We tend to have this idea that we can mechanise the land and just make tons and tons of one thing. But in the process of doing that, it upsets the equilibrium. And for us to try and balance the equilibrium, because all the pests in that move in looking to this massive nirvana of food, we pump pesticides into it. And in the process of pumping pesticides in, we don't just target the ones that we want to get rid of, it impacts on the ones that we don't really want to get rid of. And that's one of the problems in an urban environment, backyard pesticide use and accumulation. Your neighbour can spray stuff in his backyard and impact on yours. So it needs to be probably a community outlook to just reduce things that impact on bees. And you can provide habitat, lots of blossoming flowers that blossom all year round, not just ones that pop up in spring. And water sources, they actually drink water.
Okay.
And if you have a little pond out the back, you can put fish in there to stop the mosquitoes from breeding, and it'll also act as a drinking station for bees.
Yeah, right.
And it's important.
Excellent. Well, Dean, thanks very much. It's been fascinating.
That's my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So there you have it, the story of the birds and the bees, an inspiring beekeeper who demonstrates that whether you have a suburban backyard or a rural farm, we all have a responsibility to look after the bees because they help keep the environment in balance. My name is Matt Sykes and this has been LandTalk. So, you thought you knew, but Dean's going to tell you the real story of the birds and the bees.
Here's something your dad and your mum never ever told you when you were kids. The drone. He goes on top of the queen like that, right? And then when he mates, he falls backwards and she takes off with his wedding tackle. And the next drone comes along and he has to flip the wedding tackle out of the road. Now the drone dies 20 minutes after he mates. The only time in his entire life he mates, and he's dead within 20 minutes. Think about that.